what I wanted to do today is try to keep things a little bit simple, and Jan asked me to try to focus on tools that would be more specific to homeowners. So I do have an exhibit out there that has tools available, so there are folks I know from municipalities, stormwater management groups, and so forth. We have a variety of different free tools, all free software I'm talking about. I'm going to start from the beginning and just provide a little bit of a basis on some of the tree benefits that Lydia mentioned. Then we'll build up and kind of focus, drill down, talk a little bit more specifically about trees and energy. And then we'll look at a couple of tools. We just actually released a bunch of new things that started from 2017. So we actually do have quite a bit of tools that are now readily available and specific for homeowners. So you heard this term iTree, and can I just see how many folks have used iTree or have heard of it? Just a quick show of hands. Okay. So iTree has actually been around since 2006, and it's a free software set of tools that was developed by the U.S. Forest Service and these partners, including my company that I work for, Davey, Arbor Day Foundation, Society of Municipal Arborists, International Society of Arboriculture, and more recently KC Trees, and SUNY ESF, Syracuse University, has been helping us with the hydrology model. So we work with a lot of collaborators to actually bring these tools, since it's based on U.S. Forest research, and it goes back, way back until the 90s that these tools were first developed. Dr. Dave Nowak, Greg McPherson actually did some of the groundbreaking research here in the Chicago area. So it's Chicago's climate project in the 90s that was actually the impetus. And then models have been developed since then to actually add on to this. And the idea was to take this research and to try to make that publicly available so that folks in cities, municipal managers, watershed managers, and so forth could actually start taking applied research, but to use that for decision making. So the resource has actually been available since 2006, based on peer-reviewed science. So that's one of the good things, is where are these numbers coming from? They're actually equations and journal articles that have been peer-reviewed that back up the science behind the models, that's available science. And that's also an evolving part of modeling too, science. We provide technical support, so that's much of what I do. And initially that was just myself. Our team has expanded now, and on any given day we're actually helping people, because they're freely available, we find ourselves helping people working in Australia, Europe, Asia, South America, and beyond. So it's really stretching our capacity, but we do get some funding from some of those folks to build out models for those areas. And that helps us maintain the tools for free here in the States. So we're constantly looking for collaborators too, just to help on the funding part. So it's an evolving tool, freely available, and you can go on the website, download it for free. There's plenty of tools online where you don't need software to use, and I'll focus on those today. So that's one of the nice features too, is that we found that just getting computer software on your machine is a big hurdle for folks. And so we've moved to online tools that will run on smartphones and tablets and so forth, as technology has evolved over the past decade. So one of the basic premises I wanted to focus on is what we say behind iTree is a structure, function, value. Just a simple way of talking about this. And Lydia really kind of set the stage for this. And so what we can do is we can look at urban forest structure. So where are those trees spatially? So we had Morgan's doing this great study looking at trees, various different scales in the region, and drilling down actually into the neighborhoods. So we have that type of information. What are those species? She talked about the leaf surface. So if you plant a tree like a maple or so forth, yeah, that's going to have somewhat more leaf surface than a honey locust or Kentucky coffee tree. So we can look at those differences in leaf surface area and then see what are the functional benefits of those trees based on modeling. So we'll have different rain interception characteristics, different pollution interception characteristics, different energy effect characteristics based on that functional leaf surface area. And then the valuation part, and that's a little bit more sketchy how we value these things, because that varies greatly, and it varies greatly across the states and different countries too, the way folks look at carbon. So we try to use literature that's available, economic literature, one of the things that when Leah put up those benefit numbers of how much benefits those are providing. So we've actually changed and updated some of the pollution modeling now where we're looking at pollution modeling in terms of health impacts. So we can now speak to pollution reduction and what that means in terms of reduced asthma incidents, hospital stays, and so forth. So we can start connecting what trees are doing with how it's helping people with public health too. So that's something that's fairly new and exciting, that we can start building that bridge with structure, function, and then the value for it. So, but structure really is the key. And when you talk to Dr. Dave Nowak, who is one of the key scientists and our program leader, structure is the key because that's what we control as managers, as homeowners too. So we make those decisions. So why are the trees not growing over 15 inches? Could that be planting space restriction, watering? So what is that? So usually those are things that we can tie, environmental factors, it could be various things. But when you look at what we make in terms of the decisions, choosing species, a lot of communities will go to smaller species after storm damage, and work a lot on the East Coast. After Superstorm Sandy, tree was a 4-letter word for a long time because there's so much damage. And you started seeing communities plant smaller stature trees. So that's somewhat of an unwittingly response that's going to cause future benefits to decrease over time. So you don't think about those things, and models help you see that those decisions matter. So structure really is, as managers, as homeowners, that's what we make the decision on. So I'll always go back to that. That's what we can control. So that's the key that kind of sets everything forward. And we do that at various scales. Morton's project over 7 counties, regional. We now have tools that'll work at the watershed scale too, because we have a lot of folks that are interested in managing at watershed scale. So we can speak to those levels too. And initially when iTree came out in 2006, many of the tools were really geared for municipal foresters. So we found that for the first, say, 5 years or so, we were really good at kind of talking to that group. But as Lydia mentioned, that is really just a small portion of the overall urban forest. So what we wanted to do is get down to the homeowner scale. And that's where you can be impactful. So it's decisions that we make as homeowners, really. When you think about it, we're the true urban forest managers. Us folks that manage decisions every day, whether it's on your half-acre or a small lot in the city of Chicago, or a 5-acre lot, or if you're managing golf courses, cemeteries, corporate campuses, and so forth. So private property, homeowners, that really is a newer audience for us, and we're trying to find ways of engaging those folks too. Because you can find that your city forester is doing a great job managing trees, but he may not be as impactful unless he's really being able to, or the city's able to engage the homeowners where the rest of the urban forest is. So we'll talk a little bit about energy effects. Where do you place trees? Where do you plant trees? What type of trees all matters too. And we can look at the benefits on those small scales. And just to give you an idea, this is a homeowners association in Glen Ellen near the Arboretum. And so you can see the tree space around there. It looks nice and green. And what we use is tree inventory data. And this is something that Morton has been trying to gather to fill the background for some of their models. But we can look at things at this small scale too, and then take what are those species, the DDH, the condition of these trees, and then bring that easily into one of the iTree models to get quick estimates. So we can then look at the value of those trees to that particular homeowner association. So give them an idea of what is the energy savings per year, $11,600, how much pollution is being captured. There's also a property value increase. So this is a really simple model. It's really just based on using existing data and importing it into one of the iTree models where we can focus specifically on what those trees in that HOA are providing. So this is one tool. This is called iTree Streets. It generates numbers like this. Favorite tool of municipalities, but it can also be used on some smaller scales too. I want to talk a little bit about some of the benefits now, just in a little bit more detail. What exactly do we mean by air quality improvement? There's a number of different things that trees do, and the models in iTree actually will tell you. So it looks at trees' ability to absorb absorb gaseous pollutants like ozone, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide. It also models the interception of particulate matter. So many of the models are based on using local weather, local pollution data at the hourly event. So you can look at the interaction of precipitation, weather, pollution, movement, and then also canopy, because we are modeling the functional leaf surface area, and see how much canopy is intercepting particulate matter. So it's behind the models, there's a lot of sophisticated calculations that are going on to produce some of these estimates. And it also looks at some of the secondary impacts. And you can see, since we're focusing a little bit on energy, one of the things in pollution modeling is that it has what we call secondary index. So that there's less need for energy production from trees reducing energy needs locally, so there's less pollutant emissions at the power generation plants. And then you've already heard Commissioner Cronin talk about his love for oxygen, and I too am a fan of oxygen. Put that out there. Stormwater reduction. So a number of the models will give you information on stormwater too. And so that's something too, and I do want to mention this before I forget, we tend to focus in on one benefit, stormwater, energy, pollution, aesthetic value, carbon, or so forth. But I try to always think of trees and the vast variety of benefits that they provide, and those many benefits that we can't quantify too. Otherwise, you're kind of narrowing down the true value. We really don't know the true value just because it's hard to quantify some of those intangible things. So stormwater is another key one that the models will do some valuations for, both quantifying and valuing. So it takes into consideration, some of the models will do straight interception. We have some more sophisticated models that will actually look at hydrology modeling, where you can do scenario-based modeling. A tool called i3 Hydro. Tools like i3 Eco actually look at some components too that take into consideration some of the below ground hydrology characteristics. So one of the things that trees are uptaking water from the ground moisture, and they're releasing it back into the atmosphere through the process of evapotranspiration. So that too has a cooling effect, and that also relates to energy. So all these things are somewhat connected. Carbon dioxide reduction. So this too is one of the main things that folks are concerned about, especially those that are interested in climate impacts and so forth. Trees have the ability of storing and sequestering carbon in their biomass as they're growing. In addition, it's also reducing emissions, so we call those secondary impacts again. So it has that great function of carbon. How we value that right now is we use literature that's from the social cost of carbon. It takes into consideration impacts on climate change and what that might do to crop yields and so forth. So there's a lot of differences in the way we value that now, just because we have a lot of modeling information in the economic literature that ties in some of the impacts of climate change and what that means in terms of trees' values to storing carbon. So we'll drill down and look a little bit more in detail at energy. And energy and trees are somewhat interesting because I find that most folks kind of tend to think of the energy effects of trees as the summer effect, that shade effect. And that's actually certainly what I appreciate, because I have a high tolerance for cold, but a very low tolerance for heat. I actually like winter more than summer. So in the summer, you'll find that trees that are placed on the east and west, deciduous trees tend to provide the most benefit in your landscape. So this is an image from the Arbor Day Foundation that shows these trees here. And deciduous, your sun tends to come over the top, and it's going to shade the built surfaces. In addition, shading built surfaces like driveways, your air conditioning unit, too, will also help reduce heat island effect, local heat island effect impacts. And sometimes what you'll find in some of the i3 models is that we're also considering some of the impacts on the north side too. We'll talk about that too. So you'll find that trees on the north-northwest will have somewhat of a smaller impact in terms of summer reduction of electricity costs. So this is what we're going to call the summer effect of trees. which is a little bit different than the winter effect. So this is the second effect when it comes to trees and energy. And generally, trees in the winter, their biggest benefit is providing a windbreak. So you'll see here, this is a diagram that's just showing if this were the wind, which is predominantly from the north and northwest, windbreaks on that side could have a pretty significant impact at reducing that wind flow. Or shrubs planted along the base of the house, that could also have a good impact at reducing wind flow. And this could be pretty substantial too. The other thing to consider is that these deciduous trees that were planted on the east and the west now have lost their leaves. So this still allows sunlight that's still passing over. You'll notice that you tend to see the sun, it seems to be more often to the southern horizon. So instead of going directly overhead, it tends to be a little bit more on the south as it goes from east to west. So this space is usually kept open, and this allows sunlight in the winter to heat that portion of the home. Deciduous trees still allow enough sunlight to penetrate. So what you'll find is that there's two different effects when you're looking at energy. So it is possible that you actually could have a negative energy balance depending on the orientation of existing trees to your home. That's not uncommon. And some of the models that we've looked at where people have done big studies at regional scales or city scales, that's what they found, is that they've had actually a negative energy impact from trees just based on the orientation. So the take-home message is that it does matter, the decisions in energy, to replace the trees, the size of the trees, the type of trees, the conifers, deciduous, and so forth. Now, one thing I want to caution folks is I'm not advocating that, well, if I've got a tree in the south here, I need to get rid of it. By no means. I have a place up in Wisconsin, it's completely wooded, and in winter it seems to be warmer outside just because there's really not much sun. I rarely use my air conditioner in the summer, and that's what matters to me. So personal preferences are hard to account for in this type of modeling, but it's just something to keep in mind when you're thinking about trees and energy. So another effect that we don't think about too is what we call climate effect, and I mentioned that a little bit. So we talked a little bit about the hydrological properties as trees uptake water and then transpire water. They're actually creating a local cooling effect. And so as you drive through the woods on a hot summer day, you'll kind of notice it's actually a little bit cooler. What that is climate effect through that physiological process. That actually isn't of itself like a great significant amount of temperature difference. It's usually a few degrees. But combined with the effects of trees that actually are shading the built surfaces, then that can be very significant. So that combined climate effect and ability to shade surfaces like roads and driveways and so forth, that could be pretty significant too. So local cooling is something that you'll see very significantly in some of your wooded areas in the summer. The last effect is those indirect effects. So I talked a little bit about that. So what we like to do is account for the fact that if we're using less energy because we have proper landscaping around homes and businesses and so forth, then there's less demand at the production place. So that's going to account for less energy needs there and then less emissions also. So that's something, what you'll see in the models, you'll see avoided, word avoided, carbon avoided, pollutants avoided, energy avoided. So it's giving us a credit attributed to trees indirectly. So 4 different things when we talk about trees and energy. So it's a little bit more sophisticated, and this is just a quick overview of some of those things that you kind of keep in mind when you're thinking about your landscape. And some of the tools that we'll start looking at that are available that can kind of show you some of these impacts. So I want to start focusing on what are the tools that you can use. And some of the simplest tools that we have are now available. iTree Design. This is actually my favorite tool because it is designed specifically for homeowners. So we tried to create this initially for homeowners, school kids. Well, then what we found is landscape architects started using it, planners started using it, and asking us to build it out. It used to be limited to 30 trees. Now there's people that will sit there and put 800 trees. That's a lot more time than I've ever spent in both years, about 60 or 80. But there are different ways that you can get, different tools that you can use if you have substantial numbers of trees. But for a homeowner, it's your best tool. For anybody that's interested in advocacy, just doing general outreach, it's a great, simple tool. Web design, so you don't have to load software. All you have to do is go on the website, then you can just information, and within a couple minutes you can get back to some feedback. So you can see here a simple house type scenario and something a little bit more involved, time consuming. So this too is focusing on those 4 core benefits we talked about: pollution, carbon, energy, and stormwater. One of the nice things about this tool, though, is that it will also project future benefits. So if you're thinking about tree planting, it's a great tool to project future benefits. And what you'll find is that trees early on are going to provide next to nothing in terms of ecosystem services. There's just no functional leaf surface area. But over time, there's an impact. So it gets back to showing people that so that they realize that, yeah, tree planting is great, but folks come out with the golden shovels and pose for the pictures and so forth. Nobody comes out the next year when their watering truck is there, that type of stuff, the maintenance part. And that's really, I think that's the stuff that we have to start highlighting and publicizing, because that's how we get to the right side of that graph, through proper tree planting, care, focusing on those types of elements. So this tool is a great little tool that can show you some of that too. And it gives you those benefits, and it also will give you some monetary estimates for those benefits, projecting forward too. And it'll project back too, so that's another nice thing. If you have a large, substantial sized tree, it'll project accrued benefits from when that tree was, say, 1 inch or 1.5 inches to when it's 25. So it can back calculate too, which is a nice feature too, to give you what did that tree provide me throughout the past years. So different ways of looking at tree value. So you can see that to date, benefits from 2040, then over the next 30 years projected out. There's a number of different ways to use this tool. And then once you pick your species, and here this is just an 18-inch honey locust, what you'll see is that it will give you a grid around that tree. And as you move your cursor to place the tree, numbers will change at the bottom. And here's where it shows you the energy savings. So it gives you kilowatt hours, which is your electricity for summer, and therms, which is natural gas. So this will change as you move around, and you'll notice here again, this tree is planted to the north, so probably if you were to put it over here, you'd see the kilowatt hours go up substantially, and your darkest green tends to be the combination of that winter-summer effect. So it's kind of taking in multiple effects. But I was always taught when I was an urban forestry coordinator working in Wisconsin, east and west is best, and that is, for summer, but taking into those other effects, winter and so forth, tends to be, at least in this model, a little bit more northwest, because then you're capturing both summer and winter effects. So, ideally you'd have multiple trees, and then you can capture many benefits. One of the other things that it also has is it can give you sunlight. So it takes into consideration, is that tree getting total sunlight, which figures into the growth calculations. It'll also take into consideration competition between trees. So it can calculate in the back end if tree canopies are going to be intercepting, and that'll slow growth rate down for competition. So a very simple tool, but it takes into account a lot of the underground sophistication that comes from some of our other models without having to really force people to make hard decisions or hard measurements. So then it does calculations. You can put in, I think, anywhere from 1 to 60 or 99 years, and it'll project out growth over time. I will caution you, if you enter in many trees and try, like say, if you put in 30 trees and try to calculate out 90 years, it's doing a calculation for every year. So it might be money for 5 minutes if you have a very large inventory. So I've seen folks that ran one with 800 trees. That'll take quite a while to do all those calculations. And then it gives you your outputs. So it just has a number you can see at the top there where it'll give you your overall benefits, and it breaks those down by those individual ecosystem service components. You can then look at the various individual ones on those thumb pads on the top. So here we have stormwater. One of the things is that decision makers like to focus on the dollar value, but sometimes I'd like to look on the magnitude. So just looking at the amount of gallons that are being intercepted by trees, a tree. I think it's impactful. You might look at like a $12 or $100, well, that's a drop in the bucket. But it's actually sometimes the quantity of what's provided that is most impactful. here's our energy information, so you can see it gives us the amount that those 3 trees produce in terms of the kilowatt hours for summer, and then our therms for winter energy savings. Air quality reduction, and this is where I mentioned where it showed you those various pollutants, ozone, nitrogen dioxide, sulfur, ozone, particulate matter, but it's also capturing that avoided amount. So what did we save by not having additional power generation and pollutants being put into the air? So it'll give you that information too. And then also for carbon, you'll see the amount sequestered and then that amount avoided, which again is that secondary impact. So it'll give you the basics for those 4 ecosystem services. Then has tabs on the left here where you can actually look at the future years. So what are those trees going to provide in 25 years? What will they provide aggregated over time? What have they provided up to this point in time looking backward? So you can look at the different ways that those trees have provided benefits, future, forward, backward, depending on how you want to present that information or share that information. So it's a simple tool to use. How this has been used, it varies greatly too. I'll share just a couple instances or examples. You saw this picture. So this is one that was really specific to energy efficiency, where a nonprofit, Pennsylvania Horticultural Society, was planting trees in public housing. So this was taxpayer subsidized housing, so they really wanted to minimize the impact of the utility costs. And so this is what they did, is they actually went out and looked at where can we plant trees most effectively to try to have an impact in energy, is to come up with some estimates. So this was something that they used to put into their package when they actually were running this tree planting program in a neighborhood in Philadelphia. Other ways, this is a program called Energy Savings Trees. Has anybody here used this program or heard of this program at all? Ah, Beth left here. So this actually was available here, and this was ComEd, which was giving away trees for free through their website. And this is High Tree Design that was run in the background to actually show you how to plant trees strategically, and if you would, and you had to take into consideration things like utilities and so forth, right tree in the right place, to actually get free trees. That's my house in Chicago, and those are the free trees that I got for my property. So I've got a little itty-bitty lot you can see here, so I had to settle for a redbud and a small hornbeam. But it's a great program, free trees, and you just agreed to do an energy savings plantings with them. I don't know if they're going to start this up again, but it's something that I think, Beth, you know they are? Okay.
They are doing it again this year.
Oh, great, great. Well, that's something to look out for, and I think you can just do a Google on it, usually energy savings trees, and see if it's available in your area. But it's a nice program, and again, it's just built off that same design platform. And it's a way for folks to kind of start thinking about planting trees strategically, and they actually do give you, sometimes the trees that they gave me were somewhat whips, but I've seen some pretty nice substantial ones that other folks have got. Other ways to go too, one of the things we talk a lot about tree planting, tree preservation to me is maybe just as important, if not more important, because what it takes to get trees to maturity is substantial, and we're not good at that, as we found out in the data. So preserving what we have sometimes is really even more impactful, because it takes many, many years to get back what you lose. And this is just an example of a neighborhood here in actually Grand Rapids, where these homeowners actually worked for local arborists to protect their trees from emerald ash borer when they saw a neighborhood that was nearby that had all their trees cut down. So this is a way when I got that information that I could share what does that mean in terms of their investment to protect those trees as a small neighborhood, and what that's providing them in terms of some ecosystem services. And that doesn't even account for the difference in, say, property value if you were to drive down their block that still has all this mature tree canopy compared to the other block that had those trees clear cut and now just has small trees planted. So tree preservation, so it's a way of looking at trees and advocating for management or saving trees. Sustainability programs, a number of communities, corporate campuses, college campuses, cities have sustainability programs, and you'll look through what they're talking about. Very rarely will vegetation be in there. So having a tool like this and just showing that to elected officials gives them options. So it's ways that you can actually work, promote vegetation in your community, your neighborhood, and into sustainability program guidelines. So it's something that you can make impactful right at home, and you have simple tools that can help you account for that too. So we see that in a number of areas now where this is being tied in. Folks are saying use iTree design, and then let us know what the value of your treatments are on your property. So this is the National Children's Hospital that's being redesigned, and they're going to try to use this information to promote some of the things that they were doing in their sustainability program. So yeah, it can be used for some very simple advocacy things. Tree tags are on Arbor Day. You'll see this. One of the nice things with this is it can project future benefits, so we could actually have more impactful sign that my tree is providing $12 in benefits, and somebody might go, $12, what's that? But over 30 years, that's pretty compelling. So it's a simple way of making an impact statement. And then we've seen people do some really sophisticated projects with this too. This is one that our consulting group did using iTree Design to look at the trees around 26 schools in Atlanta. They put together a nice report just to kind of show the impact of managing vegetation to those schools. So many different ways that you can use design in your community, both in your home, but then also thinking, how can I expand that to sustainability programs, corporate campuses. It's a great tool that anybody can really use. A couple quick tools I do want to mention. So one of the things that we found is iTree Design is a little bit clunky when you try to run it on a phone or a tablet. So this is a new tool that we just released in the past month and a half or so, called iTree, which is running on the same design platform, but it doesn't have the feature of sketching a house. So it eliminates that part because that was really painful trying to do on a small phone outlining the home. But it works the same way. It just runs through simple questions that you'll see in iTree Design, so that you can get the same outputs real simply on the phone. So this is a nice tool if you're just talking to somebody. So instead of actually drawing your house and saying, where is that tree, this will actually just ask you, where is that tree in terms of a coordinate direction, 90 degrees, 270, 360, so, and what's the distance. So it'll just give you that information real quickly. It's more compact, and it produces the benefits in some of the labels. So we tried to put this in there, serving size, one tree, one size, and so forth. The benefits there. The other tool that we put out is iTree Species. So this is a species selector tool. It was an old tool that we've tried to breathe some life into by making it online, and it really just works now. You can use it on a tablet. You just put in your location. You can put in constraints. So if you're planting under utilities, you can take that into consideration. Then what you do is you put in the function. So what are you interested in? Are you looking for trees that are going to be impactful in energy reduction and pollution reduction? And it will serve up a list of species. Limited species, again, it's not meant to be the end-all in terms of you must plant these trees, just because it's an older list, so you're going to see a lot of it in cultivars and so forth that aren't available. But it'll give you a starting point, and it's a different way of looking at tree planting. So species, my tree, and design. And with that, I will wrap it up. I know this is just a quick intro, but I actually have these tools available at our booth, so if anybody wants to stop by and try any one of these, Jan was kind enough to get some computers, so we have one available. And yeah, it's only a couple minutes of your time. Videos are available, and they're, like again, they're free, so I encourage you to use them. So with that, I thank you.